Good morning. My name is Sandy Schaefer, and I am an instructor with the PLTS team in Washington, D.C. Joining me today is Nathan Noble, Product Manager for the PLTS GIS Data Reviewer. We want to welcome you all to today's live training seminar, Introduction to PLTS for ArcGIS 9.2. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the acronym, PLTS stands for Production Line Toolset. In today's presentation, we will introduce you to the Production Line Toolset extension and demonstrate how these tools can help with database and map creation. So let's begin with our first topic. What is PLTS and where does it fit? Whatever production environment you find yourself working in, there is usually a standard set of steps that make up the overall process. The first stage in the process is to capture the data. Your data may come from already existing paper or digital map sources, satellite imagery, or GPS, global positioning systems. When capturing the data, you may choose to store it in a geodatabase. Once the data is stored in the database, you will probably need to edit it. During the editing process, you will complete the geometry capture and make sure the features have the required attributes. Once all the edits are complete, it is time to review the data. In this stage, you will document any errors that exist and perform any needed corrections. With the edit and review stages complete, you are ready to create your final output. That output may be in the form of a cartographic map or digital data. So what is PLTS and how does it fit into this production process? PLTS, again, stands for Production Line Toolset. It is an extension to the ArcGIS desktop product. The purpose of PLTS is to help with the overall production process. With PLTS, you will get tools to help manage the production workflow. There are also tools available to help streamline data production and maintenance. These tools are designed to provide an efficient editing and attribution environment. Part of PLTS has been specifically created for performing data review. This component comes with different automated checks that can be applied to your data. Along with the automated review tools, there are tools to help with conducting visual review and documenting the errors. Finally, PLTS contains tools to design to enhance the cartographic map production process. In this component, there are tools that will help you build and manage a map series or a map book. When it comes right down to it, PLTS really is workflow management, geodatabase creation, data extraction and attribution, quality control and data review, and cartographic production. When you start to explore the PLTS extension, you will learn that there are two tiers to the product. The first tier is the PLTS Foundation. This is the base tier providing you with all the workflow management, data production, data review, and cartography tools. PLTS Foundation is sold as a packaged extension. However, there are three components that can be purchased as standalone extensions. I'll tell you which three in a minute. The components of PLTS Foundation are Job Tracking for ArcGIS, JTX. This workflow management component is part of PLTS Foundation, but it is one of the three that can be purchased standalone. Foundation Tools. Now don't let the name confuse you. This component of PLTS Foundation contains the data production and maintenance tools that streamline the editing and attribution environment. The Foundation tools are only available with the full PLTS Foundation extension. The GIS Data Reviewer contains tools for performing data QC. Checking data quality is an important part of the production process, and the Data Reviewer provides a complete review environment. This is another one of the PLTS Foundation components that can be purchased as a standalone extension. Finally, we have the Map Production System Atlas, your cartographic aid. MPS Atlas contains the tools and functionality for producing a series of high-quality cartographic maps. This component comes with PLTS Foundation or can be one of the three that's purchased standalone. The second tier of the PLTS product is termed the Solution tier. This tier provides users with database and cartographic templates that are geared towards meeting the standards of their chosen industry. Some of the solutions also come with additional tools to help industry standards for data capture and cartographic production. Although each solution is sold separately, they do come packaged with PLTS Foundation, which, if you remember, includes the 4 components we just went over. In this seminar, we're going to focus on the base PLTS Foundation tier functionality. So let's start our discussion with job tracking for ArcGIS, or JTX. This PLTS Foundation component is designed to perform workflow management. With JTX, you get a separate application that works directly with ArcGIS Desktop and PLTS to help manage task completion. Using JTX, you can define the workflow for jobs that are being completed. Using the workflow outlines what needs to be done and the order that the steps need to be completed, as shown here in the graphic. JTX can also be used to assign jobs or tasks to different users in the organization. It can track the overall job progress and record a feature-level transaction history, which means recording all of the changes made during an edit session. You can learn more about JTX by listening to the web-based training seminar titled Introduction to Job Tracking for ArcGIS JTX. This free seminar is available from the ESRI training website. Moving on to the foundation tools. These tools are named as such because data creation, editing, and attribution are the base, or foundation, of most production processes. This component of PLTS helps by providing efficient access to tools necessary for data loading, capture, and maintenance. When you work with the data loading tools, you have the ability to load already existing digital data into your working or production geodatabase. The PLTS data loading tools allow for multiple sources to be loaded into multiple target feature classes or subtypes in a single load operation. This operation is aided by a cross-reference database that guides the load. Once you have the data loaded and you're prepared to edit, the foundation tools provide you with a streamlined editing environment. The streamlining comes from many of the core ArcGIS editing tools being exposed on a toolbar to provide easier access to them. Editing is also streamlined by the addition of what we call single-click editing. So when you choose the Create New Feature task from the PLTS editing toolbar, shown here, automatically the Sketch tool will be activated for me. So when I click on the Create New Feature task, notice that the Sketch tool was activated. So a process that before took 2 clicks now takes only 1 click to run. The foundation tools also offer new polygon editing tasks, thus enhancing the available list of feature creation tasks. For example, there is a task called Create New Difference Polygon that will allow me to create a new polygon feature and subtract the area of an already existing polygon feature. So let's say I need to create a new wetland area around an existing lake. I would set my target to the wetland and digitize the new polygon. When finished, I would see 2 coincident polygons, and if I pulled them apart, I could see how the existing lake area was removed from the wetland that I created. This is almost like the functionality of the autocomplete polygon task, but the Create Difference polygon is maintaining my coincident geometry across my 2 feature classes. When you have PLTS installed, you will perform your attribution processes using tabs that are added to the table of contents. The PLTS Target tab is where you will go to set your target layer and to configure the attributes of the feature that you're going to be digitizing. This pre-attribution of features not only helps to streamline the digitizing process, but it also allows for the attributes to be validated on the fly before the feature or features are created. You can also save the attribute combination and reuse them or distribute them to other editors working on similar products. This functionality is called Attribute Favorites. When working with favorites, you will set the favorite as the target rather than selecting the original layer or subtype. So let's go to our first software demonstration. What I'm going to do is activate the PLTS extension and explore the Foundation Tools editing and attribution environment. So I have some data here from Wilson, North Carolina. And what we want to do is we want to create some edits. Now, the first thing that I need to do with PLTS is I need to go and activate my extension. I'll do that just like any other extension from ArcGIS by going to Tools and Extensions. And as you can see, each of the individual components that we talked about is an extension that I can turn on in the dialog. So now with my extension activated, I can actually go in and start using the tools and start my edit session. PLTS does have a toolbar manager for me. It's called my docking manager, and I can actually create preset locations for my toolbar docking. I'm going to use the demo one toolbars, and I'm going to say yes, go ahead and change my toolbar settings. All of my toolbars are docked in the way that I wanted them to be docked with that pre-configuration. Most of these toolbars are all about helping me perform an edit, but one of the toolbars is actually a dockable window that we call the PLTS bookmarks. The bookmarks in PLTS work the same way as they work within the core ArcGIS, except they're here as a dockable window. I can also right-click on a bookmark and choose to import or export all of the bookmarks and share them with other people in my organization. Now that I have my toolbar set, I'm going to go ahead and start my edit session from my PLTS editing toolbar. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some brand new road features. So I'm going to set my target using my PLTS target tab to local streets. Now once I set the target, I need to then go in and make sure that I set my attributes for that feature. So I'm actually going to change my buffer distance to 15, and I'm going to change my road width to 45. Now when I click apply, what's going to happen is behind the scenes, PLTS is going to validate these attribute values for me. And I can see that I have an attribute error. I needed to actually populate the name of this local street because it cannot be blank or null. So I'll say OK to that, and I'll go ahead and enter a name for this street. We'll call it Smith Street. Now when I apply, my attributes are valid, and I can go in and add my new feature. Again, watch when I click on the Create New Feature task that the Sketch tool will automatically be activated. I click on my task, and I have my Sketch tool, which will allow me to go in and create my new Smith Street that I need to create. When I finish the Edit task, I can actually go over to the PLTS Selection tab and see that the street was named Smith Street, my buffer distance was set to 15, and my road width was 45. I can continue to create new streets with these same attribute values because I haven't yet changed them out of my PLTS target. One thing that PLTS does help me do when digitizing is it helps with creating of intersections. So with core ArcGIS, if I want to create a street that has all the same attributes and spans across these existing roads, I would have to start and stop my digitizing at each location of the intersection. PLTS gives me this checkbox, which will automatically create the intersections for me as I cross existing features. So in one edit operation, instead of creating one street, PLTS has gone in and actually created 4 different segments for me. And again, the attributes are all the same because I have not changed the attribute values from what I preset in the target. One thing that I can do with the Selection tab is I can transfer attributes of existing features to other existing features. So let's say I want to take this name and road width, and I want to transfer them to another road. First thing I need to do is actually cache in those fields that I want to transfer. So I'm going to cache the checked on fields. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my street that I need to transfer that information to. I will turn on my selection environment so I can actually select streets. And then from the PLTS Selection tab, I will transfer the Smith Street information to this Kingwood Road. So now my new street is going to be Smith, and the road width is 45 like I selected. Now, one of the things that ArcGIS 9.2 did for enhancing usability was they included a lot of mouse shortcuts. For example, I can click on my mouse wheel and pan around without having to interact with the toolbars. This is a huge time saving when you're in an editing environment. So one of the things that PLTS has done to help with this streamlining of the editing environment is on the right click, we've added a shortcut to some of the functional tools that we use regularly. So if I use my right click, I can switch from my edit tool directly to my sketch tool and digitize in the new street that I need. Again, that's without having to go and interact with the toolbars. I think at this point, we'll go ahead and save our edits, stop our editing session, and go back to our slide presentation. So in this first section, we talked about the overall PLTS production process and how the foundation extension enhances the production stages. In the software demo, you observed a few of the PLTS foundation editing tools and attribution tools that help with that overall streamlining. I'll now turn it over to Nathan, who's going to answer some of your questions.
Thanks, Sandy. First question we have from Kurt from Clearwater. It says, we currently use PLTS in a 9.1 environment. What version and when will PLTS support 9.2, including SDE? So question is, when is PLTS 9.2 coming out? Today is actually the day we are cutting the gold CD. So next week it's going to be in manufacturing, and the following week it will be shipping. So end of the month is the answer to that question. And PLTS will support 9.2, and including SDE and the other aspects of 9.2 that are core ArcGIS. Another question from a user, what are the major differences between PLTS 9.1 and 9.2? There are many, but to list some of the major ones, the first one, probably the most significant, is the rewrite and the improvement of the GIS Data Reviewer. So Sandy's going to be talking about this in the next section, but the Data Reviewer has been enhanced with a whole bunch of new types of validation that we can run, and also with the ability to codify that information in a batch file, save it out, and so that we can have reproducible, consistent quality control. Another question from several users about licensing requirements for different PLTS components. So PLTS Foundation, which Sandy's discussed in this first section, the licensing requirement for that is Arc Editor. And there are pieces of PLTS Foundation that can be sold standalone. JTX, MPS Atlas, and Reviewer can all be sold standalone. For Atlas and Reviewer, they can be used with an ArcView license. Last question. What are the additional tools in PLTS that can aid in feature collection and updates? So Sandy referred to this in her demo, and if we had to kind of summarize which of the editing tools that would be kind of at the forefront, I would say it would be the PLTS Selection and Target tab, which allows you to do on-the-fly validation of features, not just passive after the fact, so that we reduce the errors that are entered into the database, kind of the stitch in time saves 9 principle. And also the ability we have in the Target tab with favorites to do pre-attribution of the data to reduce the number of button clicks and interaction that the user has to go through when they are adding features into the database. So that ends the question answering session for the moment, and I'll pass it back to Sandy.
Thank you, Nathan. Those were great questions. We welcome more. In this portion of the seminar, we're going to explore the GIS Data Reviewer. Remember, the GIS Data Reviewer is one of the PLTS Foundation components that you have the option of purchasing as a standalone extension. The GIS Data Reviewer provides a complete system or working environment for processing and assessing data quality. It comes packaged with tools to help not only with visually reviewing the data, but also with performing automated data checks. The visual review tools help when you are manually evaluating the spatial location and attribute values of a feature. These tools help to document which feature is incorrect or has an error. It also will document what needs to be done to correct the problem. An example of an automated tool would be one that is configured to check for spatial accuracy of features. One such example of a spatial check is shown here, where there's a school located inside of a lake polygon. It's not a typical place to put a schoolhouse. There are also automated checks that will look for errors in the attribute values of spatial and non-spatial tables. All errors found regardless of how it was found, are documented in the reviewer table. This table records such information as the error location, what is incorrect about the feature, and if the error has been corrected. The reviewer table really is the heart of the overall review process. It contains all the information about the data review. It tracks the anomalies of the errors that were found and will automatically document information about who located the error, as well as information on who corrected and ensured that the errors were properly corrected or verified. It also contains some additional tools to help you manage and navigate through the different records and to capture geometry of missing features. In the GIS Data Reviewer, there are 38 different automated review checks. These are termed batch checks. You can use these to perform an automated review, and they're designed to look at the entire data set or a current selection and identify features that do not pass the specified criteria. The batch checks will evaluate how features relate to other features. They are organized by category name, which helps you to find which criteria you are looking to test. There are spatial as well as non-spatial data checks that you can run. For example, the geometry on geometry check will locate features that are overlapping when they shouldn't be. A geodatabase topology is not required to run this check. Errors identified can automatically be written to the reviewer table, or you can choose to browse to each one and look at it before committing it as a record to the table. Not only can you run each batch check separately, but I can use them together to perform a cumulative review. The cumulative review is termed a batch job, and it combines all the individual checks into one review process. The tool used to run a batch job is called the Batch Validate tool. Just like with the batch checks, when you run a batch job, all the errors or anomalies are documented in the reviewer table. With the automated review complete, the next step is to usually conduct a visual review. This is a more time-consuming process because you will typically visit each feature or a selected set of features. If you are working with a selected set of features, you can browse the selection using the Browse Features tool on the GIS Data Reviewer toolbar, shown here. This will open the Browse Features dialog. When browsing each feature, you can choose to commit the feature to the reviewer table. This will allow you to select any that have been incorrectly digitized or attributed. If you aren't working with a selection set, you can simply select an individual feature that is an error and record it as a record to the reviewer table using the Commit to Reviewer Table button, shown here. Both the Browse Features and Commit Record tools will prompt you to enter information about what needs to be done to correct the feature. Now, if you have missing features, there are two methods that you can use to document the error in the reviewer table. You can capture a simple XY point location, or you can capture the entire missing geometry. When capturing a simple XY point location, you will use the Flag Missing Features tool. So in this example, there is an intersecting street that is missing between these two parallel roads. I'm going to activate the Flag Missing Features tool and simply click the XY location where the missing street needs to be placed. Then I am prompted to provide information about that missing feature. If you would rather capture the entire geometry of the missing feature, you'd use one of the tools inside the reviewer table called the Notepad Feature Tools. With the Polyline Notepad Feature tool, we would literally digitize in the missing geometry. And when finished, we would be prompted to provide all the needed information about that missing feature. The geometry is stored in the reviewer geodatabase and can be used by the correction technician when the time comes. So let's go to our next software demonstration. We're going to work within a review session to find and document some errors in our data. So here again, I'm looking at the Wilson data set that we saw in the last demonstration. But in this context, I am the reviewer. So I have the source materials that were used to perform the data extraction and attribution, and I'm going to compare the features that were captured to what those source materials say and evaluate their accuracy. first thing that I need to do when working in a reviewer session is actually to start the session. I have a session manager button that's going to allow me to do that. Now, a review session is kind of like an edit session, but it allows me to interact with the data in a reviewing context. I'm going to choose an already existing session. Notice it remembers my username, and I'm going to say start the session. Once my session is started, I can close my session manager and begin my data review. Now, one of the tools that the data reviewer has to help me with a visual review is called the QC overview window. I can open the QC overview window and get an idea for what's been done within the review. I can set some of the properties for the overview window, for example, telling it which data set has the quads that are going to be used for the digital review. I can also set a reference layer which will help me see where those quads are in context to the rest of the area. So these 6 quads here are grayed out. I know that they've already been reviewed, so I don't have to conduct my review there. But what I can do is I can select an existing quad that's not been checked, and I can zoom directly to that quad. I can use the up, the down, the right, and the left buttons to also navigate to different quads, or I could type in a quad number in where it says grid cell, and it will automatically take me to that quad. I'm going to review this F5 quad. So let's say that we know, based off of our source materials here, that this street is actually a dangle. It's supposed to connect to the larger street here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the flag missing features tool, and I'm going to place an X and Y location indicating where that missing street is supposed to go. I'm going to, in the missing feature details, say that it's a local street. We need to make sure we add this street, and we need to give it a name of Peterson Avenue. When I say OK, it's going to commit that record to the reviewer table for me. I could also capture that same feature by collecting the X and Y geometry. Or, I'm sorry, by collecting the full feature geometry. I just did the X and Y. Let me symbolize the geometry that I just captured for you, so you can see where that feature is. Now, if I wanted to capture the line for the road that is missing, I would use my Notepad feature tool inside of my reviewer table. So let me go in and instead of placing the X and Y, actually add in the full line. When I'm done digitizing in the line, I have to fill out the missing features details again using the same information as I did the last time. And again, this is just a different way of capturing the same error. When I say OK, that record is written to my reviewer table. Let's take a look at the reviewer table. It is a dockable window, and it's docked itself here next to my table of contents. If I scroll over in the reviewer table, I can see information about what's been collected during this review. For example, the origin table lets me know that both of these errors are from the streets feature class. The origin check lets me know that one was collected using the flag missing features tool and the other with the polyline notepad. And if I go a little farther over, I can see that it has me as the technician that found the error and today's date as when the error was located. So those are a few of our visual reviews tools. Let's go in and actually talk about some of our automated review tools. And before I do this, I'm going to actually turn off some of my layers just to simplify my view. So the first automated check I want to run is with the zoning areas. So I'm going to go in and set my data check. It's going to be a feature on feature because I want to find out which zoning geometries are overlapping. So for feature class 1, I'm going to set that to zoning. Now with the geometry on geometry, I can find features overlapping within a feature class or between. Because this is within, I'm going to set feature class 2 to zoning as well. Down here at the bottom, I'm going to specify what spatial relationship I want to look for. In here, I want to find features that are overlapping. When I say OK, I now have my check configured. I can actually go and run the check. I can specify which extent to run the check on. In this case, I'll run the full database and say OK. Right now, it's going and it's looking at all of my geometries, and it's identifying which of those zoning polygons are actually overlapping. When it's done, it'll come up with a prompt telling me how many errors it found. In this case, we have 2 features that are overlapping. I could, at this point, write the errors directly to the reviewer table, but I think what I'm going to do is show you the Browse Results functionality. When I click the Browse Results, it opens what we like to call the Feature Browser, and it is, again, a dockable window. It takes me to the first of 2 features that are in error, and I can browse through each of the different features. Notice as I browse, the feature flashes. Let's say that at this point, I know that this little zoning polygon is the one that's causing the problem. So I can choose here to commit it as a record to the reviewer table, and it's automatically documented for me. I want to show you another way that we can use the geometry on geometry test, and this time I'm going to do with my fire stations and my fire zones. So I'm going to open the geometry on geometry check again. And what we're going to do is we're going to locate the fire stations that are not inside of a fire zone. So I'll set my first feature class to fire station and my second feature class to fire zone. Now I want to narrow down this search just a little bit. I want to find those fire stations that are actually active because I do know that I have some fire stations in Wilson that are inactive. So I'll make sure that my where clause is built to select those that have a status of active. And then I need to finish setting my geometry check. In this case, I want to find again the fire stations that are not within. So I'm going to set the within and click the not checkbox. Say OK, and now go and run my check. I'm going to run it on the full database, and when I say OK, it comes up with the number of fire stations that were not within my fire zone. I'm going to write this one directly to the reviewer table so I can show you our batch checks. Now my manager has pre-configured some batch jobs that need to be run for me. I'm going to turn on all of my layers and I'm going to go and open that batch job that he's written for me. So I'm going to say add and I'm going to navigate to the location of the batch job. Again, a batch job is a culmination of multiple geometry checks or table checks. So I have some geometry checks here as well as attribute checks. I can at this point choose to turn off or on certain ones of the checks. But if I was really doing this as a cumulative review, I think I would probably run them all together. I would say full database and I would click the run. And that would allow the batch validate to go and check all of my features based off of the pre-configured criteria. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop my review session and return us back to the presentation. So in this last section, you learned about the GIS Data Reviewer. We talked about the reviewer table and how it's the heart of the data review, recording all of the errors and anomalies that we found. We talked about the visual review tools, as well as our automated data checks that, again, can be put together into cumulative review called a batch job. At this point, I think I'll let Nathan answer some more of your questions.
Thanks, Sandy. First question we have here is from Lance in Colombia. Where do I find PLTS documentation? There's several different levels of documentation. If you have PLTS installed, the main place you're going to find documentation is in the online help file. So there's no, if you get the actual box, there's no hard copy documentation. You'll find everything if you go to Start Program Files, PLTS, you will find the help documentation there. There's also information on the web. If you go to esri.com/PLTS, you can find a lot of kind of general information about PLTS, the upcoming release. There's also some online presentations on the reviewer and other parts of PLTS that you can see from that location. There's also the support.esri.com. There's a website that has our downloads and other information about PLTS. So there's a variety of different places where you can find PLTS documentation. Another question from Jeff in Louisville, Kentucky. When you say Data Reviewer is standalone, does this mean that I can use it without other ArcGIS software installed? So no. When I say that Data Reviewer or Atlas is standalone, What I really mean is that it can be sold as those are both extensions. PLTS is also an extension. You need to have ArcGIS, either ArcView, ArcEditor, or ArcInfo license. You have to have that on the machine in order to use any of these products. Data Reviewer, Atlas are sold for the price of an extension. PLTS Foundation is sold for the price of 2 extensions. So if you want any 2 of the components, you can get all 4 components for the price of 2 extensions. Another question, again from Kurt from Clearwater. Can the Reviewer geodatabase live in SDE? I'm glad somebody asked this question because the answer is yes at 9.2. In previous versions at 9.1, the Reviewer geodatabase actually was a personal geodatabase, but one of the many enhancements that we made to the Reviewer at 9.2 is that you can now store the Reviewer information in your enterprise database. It supports versioning, and so you can have this central place where everybody is going in and storing their information, and therefore it works quite well with kind of the JTX enterprise workflow that way. So the answer to that question, yes. Last question from Denise from the town of Basalt. What is the advantage of PLTS over ArcEditor? So I guess that the answer to that question is kind of the whole purpose of this presentation. But in particular, with regard to editing, PLTS provides you with some additional validation capabilities. So the standard ArcEditor geodatabase functionality allows you to go in and you can set up domains and subtypes, and you can set up database topology. I like to think of it as kind of concentric circles. So that's a circle of functionality. With PLTS, we surround that circle with another circle that provides you the ability to extend your domains and subtypes with CNT, with condition table information. You can extend the database topology with the Reviewer checks. You can do on-the-fly validation of your data. So PLTS supports all of the core functionality, and it extends it for some more robust validation and editing experience. So that's all the questions we have time for at the moment. I'll pass it back to Sandy.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. Those were wonderful questions. We will now take a look at the cartographic tools available in the PLTS Map Production System Atlas, MPS Atlas. MPS Atlas is another one of the PLTS Foundation components that can be purchased as a standalone extension. The Map Production System Atlas is geared towards high-quality cartographic production and is used in many organizations that need to produce a series of maps that have the same basic layout template. With the map series control, you can create a series of maps quickly, and the batch printing and exporting tools allow for fast production of the finished product. When you create a map series with Atlas, you get a dynamic layout that will update automatically. For example, if a north arrow is added to one map sheet, it is added automatically to all of the map sheets. In addition to the dynamic layout, Atlas comes with the capability of displaying dynamic text on the layout. Dynamic text is text that will update based on pre-configured properties of the text. Controlling the surround elements is also made easy in Atlas through the use of automated element placement rules. With the placement rules, you can ensure that the north arrow, for example, is always centered above the scale bar. Now, when you build a map series in Atlas, you have a couple of choices on the wizard that you can use. The Build Map Series wizard is a comprehensive wizard that prompts you for all the properties that you want to set for the series. The prompts range from information such as the name of the series all the way to the spatial reference to be applied to each map sheet. There are no assumptions made by the Build Map Series wizard, and at the end you will have a complete map series. Now, the Build Simple Map Series wizard will also provide you with a complete series. However, it is a shorter wizard. It makes some assumptions about the properties of the data frame which will be applied during the initial creation of the series, such as the spatial reference. These properties can be changed or updated later. The Create Map Sheet does not create an entire map series for you. Rather, it will use the current visible extent as the area of interest and generates a single map sheet with all the properties of a map series or a template that you have specified. When using the Build Map Series or Build Simple Map Series wizard, you will need to specify the AOI, or Area of Interest. The AOI defines the extent that will be displayed in the primary data frame. Your AOI can be identified by using already existing features in a geodatabase feature class. You can use points, lines, or polygons. When working with points or lines, you will specify a buffer distance in the Map Series wizard, which will define the area around the feature that needs to be displayed in the series. When specifying the AOI, you have two options. The first is you can choose to include multiple features. In this type of series, each feature chosen becomes a map sheet. A common example of such a series is a topographic map series displaying geographic information across different areas. With this style of map series, the AOI changes, but the features included and their symbology will remain the same. Alternatively, you could choose to include just a single feature in the map series. This will allow you to create what is known as a thematic map series. With a thematic map, the area of interest stays the same, however, information being depicted changes. For example, in the thematic map series we're showing here, we have the population for the United States, but we're showing the population in 1990, the female population in 1990, and then the male population in 1990. Our area of interest stays the same, but the information depicted is changing. MPS Atlas stores the map series and all the properties associated with it in your map document. Once you create a map series, it will be displayed in the MPS Atlas tab on the ArcMap table of contents. Using the context menu in the MPS Atlas tab, you have the ability to toggle between map sheets. You can also change the status of a map sheet from shared to single or back again. Shared map sheets are linked, meaning all surround elements are shared, and you will see the link icon next to the map sheet. For example, with a shared map sheet, if I did add a north arrow to one, it would add that north arrow to all sheets. Single map sheets are not linked, and you will not see the chain link next to the name of the map sheet. This means that if I add any elements to that single map sheet, that change will not affect my overall series. From the context menu, I also have access to my batch printing and export functionality, allowing me to print or export more than one map at a time. In addition to being able to create a map series, Atlas also comes with additional cartographic tools. These tools can be used on an Atlas series as well as on individual layouts that are not part of a series. These tools include dynamic text elements, the graphic table element, grid manager, and a couple different batch symbology tools. Dynamic text is text in a map layout that will automatically change based on attributes either from layers in a data frame or properties of the map document, or even computer properties. Types of dynamic text include computer name, data frame properties such as spatial reference information, the date, feature attributes being pulled from attribute values selected, map properties, time, and username. For example, you can create a title for your map sheet that changes automatically when you change to a different area of interest. Here we see the Austin East Quad, and when we change our map sheet to the Eastern Shore, the title is automatically going to update to reflect the new quad that I'm looking at. The graphic table element with MPS Atlas is used to create dynamic tables in your maps around. The attributes or values in the table come from the features within the visual map extent. The table is dynamic because as the data in the visual extent changes, the rows and columns will update to reflect the new information. Not only can I create regular tables with text information, but I could also include symbols in the table as we're seeing in the large title streams table here. The grid manager is used to create reference grids for your map. You can use it also to create graticules and borders for your data frame. One way the grid manager is different from the core reference grid wizard is that the grids are created as features and not as graphics, which allows them to be visible in both the data view and the layout view. When using the grid manager, you are able to define exactly how the grid is going to look on your map. This includes being able to create grids that span multiple UTM zones. The grids displayed crossing the multiple zones are known as UTM zippers, and they show how two different grid zones match up across your area of interest. In addition to the surround element functionality provided with Atlas, there are also tools to help you symbolize and label your features. These batch symbology tools are configured prior to creating the series, and when applied, let you symbolize multiple features at once. There are a couple of different methods that can be used. The first method, called the Visual Specifications tool, builds on core ArcGIS 9.2 functionality for representations, labels, and annotation technology. With visual specifications, you are working with database-driven cartography, where you will use logical expressions to link the field values to the symbology you want to use. You can also use the visual specification tool to create text strings to be used as label or annotations for your features. An alternative to using the visual specification tool is to use PLTS views. With PLTS views, you can configure your layer properties and save the layer file in a database. You can also save your data frame properties in that same database. PLTS views acts as a dynamic template for your layers, and when using the views, the cartographer can choose which property of the layer or data frame to update. In this last software demonstration, we're going to explore an existing map series and some of the functionality that Atlas provides. So here again, I'm looking at my Wilson, North Carolina data. And instead of looking at it in an editing or a reviewing context, we're looking at it within the cartographic sense. I have a pretty simple series built. There are only about 12 or 16 sheets in my series. And in the actual series for the layout, I have a text that is my title. This is a special text because it's a dynamic text reading the number of the current displayed map sheet from an attribute value. I also have my legend, and I have an overview map that, again, is another dynamic overview. It's just another data frame in my display that's being controlled by my series. So as I go and I right-click and toggle to, say, map sheet 455, my dynamic text as well as my overview window are going to update to reflect the fact that I'm now looking at map sheet 455. My area of interest will also change. All of my map sheets are shared. So if I wanted to go in and insert a north arrow onto my map sheets, I would do that using all of the regular core ArcGIS processes. Now that I've inserted that north arrow on one map sheet, because they're shared, that north arrow is going to persist through all of the layouts that I have for my map sheets. Now, if I wanted to disconnect a map sheet from the series, I would right-click on it and say, Make Map Sheet Single. This will allow me to remove that map sheet from the series. Once a map sheet is single, changes that I make to this map sheet do not impact the rest. So if I was to insert a scale bar, for example, that scale bar will be only on this map sheet and not on any of my shared map sheets. And I'll show you again that it is, in fact, on my single map sheet. Let's go and add some dynamic text to our features here. Let's say that I want to have a piece of dynamic text to the top and the bottom of my map sheet indicating which quad 455 has above it and which quad 455 has, or 445 has below it. I'm going to do that using my dynamic text tool. So I'm going to click on the dynamic text and choose where I want to place the text. Then I'm going to go in and edit the properties of the text. In the properties dialog, what I need to do is I need to specify what kind of dynamic text I'm working with. So in this case, it's going to be pulled from a feature layer. When I say insert, it allows me to put that dynamic text in as part of my string. I can mix dynamic text with non-dynamic or non-updating text. To configure the dynamic text, I actually need to follow the hyperlink and go into the actual properties of that text piece. I need to tell it that the data frame it's going to pull from is the natural areas data frame, and the layer is, in fact, going to be the quad outlines. This layer has the attribute information I need to pull. For this particular dynamic text, I need to pull the feature that is above my current visible extent. I could, at this point, just choose to pull that information from the ID field, but I want to write an expression on that field. so that I can actually configure how that ID is going to look. So I'm going to say, pull just the information from the right 3 characters of my ID. So I can use any VB script or JavaScript that I'm used to working with for normal label expressions with my dynamic text. If I click verify, I can see that it's going to pull 3 characters that are to the right, dropping off the letter that precedes my quad numbers. I say OK, and let me finally change the size of the text so we can see it. One final OK, and I now have quad 435 above my current visible extent. And you can verify that by looking at my overview window. So if I go to quad 453, for example, my dynamic text is going to update to show me that it's 443 that is above quad number 453. I could add in also something that's being pulled from the computer information, such as the date or the time. So let me add in another piece of dynamic text down here at the bottom that will allow me to provide a timestamp or date stamp for these maps. I'm going to choose date and time, insert, again, follow the hyperlink so I can set the properties. And what I want to do is I actually want to use the formatting of Thursday, March 15th, and the year. When I say OK, I'll change the size so again you can see it. One final OK, and it is now added to all of the map sheets inside of my series. And again, because this one was single, it didn't get either of those 2 dynamic text pieces that I added. One last thing I want to show you before we go back to the question and answer session is the element rules. Notice that the north arrow I added here is not really centered over top of my scale bar. And I can manually center it, but it's better if I use my dynamic element placement rules to automatically center that piece of text for me. So I'm going to go in my element rule manager, create a new rule, and I'm going to actually create a horizontal rule. I'm going to change the name here so that it's a north arrow horizontal rule, and I'm going to say that I want to align the center of my north arrow even with the center of my legend. Say OK to this one. I'll move this just slightly to the side so you can again see that they are not centered. And when I say OK, my north arrow automatically is centered for me. We talked about batch visual or batch symbology tools, and I can actually have pre-created views of my data or pre-created symbol sets of my data that I can use. Let's say I want to take this natural features quad and use the same exact layout, but have it be cadastral and not natural features. From my PLTS Views toolbar, I can choose the cadastral view, click the apply, and my map series is going to change, so I now have cadastral features. So in this last section, we explored MPS Atlas and one of the components of PLTS Foundation. We discussed the different types of map series that can be created, the dynamic text elements that come with Atlas, and some of the batch symbology tools. I'll now turn it over to Nathan, who's going to answer some more of your questions.
Thanks, Sandy. So a few questions. One from Getachew in New London. Can you compare Atlas with Maplex functionality? So we've had several questions about those two. So Maplex is really the focus of Maplex, both the ArcGIS extension and the standalone Maplex, is on annotation placement, on being able to set up these very specific rules so that you minimize the amount of time that you have to go in and spend time editing your annotation. MPS Atlas is not intended as a replacement to that, but they work very well together. Atlas is a map book application that allows you to generate many map sheets in a map series and manage all of that easily. So the two products work together, but they kind of have two distinct purposes. Another question from Benjamin and Charlotte. Would MPS Atlas be good to use for a first-time map book production versus the developer sample map book? Well, I think it would, but let me talk about a few differences between Atlas and the map book. First of all, it's a supported product, ongoing maintenance, service packs, and so forth. Also, Atlas comes with additional functions that Sandy talked about, like the graphic table elements tool, the grid manager, some cartographic editing capabilities, and additional functionality for managing your single versus shared sheets. So for doing one-off editing and so forth. So Atlas has significantly more functionality than the developer sample map book. Another question, Julie from Placerville. If a single map sheet is made using MPS, can another user who does not have MPS open the MXD? So the answer is, if you don't have Atlas, yes, you can still open the MXDs. Well, there's a couple options when you're creating your map series. One option is to save these multiple layouts all in the same MXD. The other option would be to have an MXD created for each map. So if you're, for example, creating a map series of the United States, you could have 50 separate MXDs created, or you could store all that information in one MXD. You might want to create 50 separate ones if you are intending to distribute that information, and people will use those 50 separate MXDs who do not also have MPS Atlas. Question about PLTS licensing from Larry in Clewiston. Can you get PLTS with both floating license and or single-use license? So the answer there is yes. PLTS supports the licensing that exactly the same as the core ArcGIS product. You can put the floating license or single-use license just like we have with the core ArcGIS. Last question from another user, can graticules be added to the map series? The answer is any of the standard properties of your data frame, or like a grid graticule that you could set by going to your data frame properties and adding one. If you use that as your template for your map series, that can be added to your MPS Atlas map series and used. So the answer to that is yes. In addition to that, if you want to have a more customized graticule, you can utilize the grid manager with MPS Atlas. So there's a variety of different ways you can do that. The answer to that is yes. So that's all the time we have for now, and I'll pass it back to Sandy.
Thank you, Nathan. Before we go, I would like to point you to a few resources. For additional training in PLTS, we do have some web courses that are available. We have Introduction to Map Production System Atlas for ArcGIS. This is based off of the 9.1 functionality. We also have the web seminar I mentioned earlier, Introduction to Job Tracking for ArcGIS, JTX. For instructor-led training, we have 3 courses, Data Production with PLTS, Data QC using the PLTS GIS Data ReViewer, and Cartography with the PLTS Map Production System Atlas. To find out information about these courses, you can go to the ESRI training website and do a keyword search of the catalog using PLTS as your keyword. So bring up information about when these classes are being offered and where. Your comments help us to improve our seminars. We ask that you take a moment to complete our survey. Just click the Give Us Feedback link to take the survey. We hope you enjoyed today's seminar. On behalf of ESRI, I'd like to thank you all for attending.